Hey everybody, it's Professor Diffley. This is History 100, Chapter 3. This is Part 3. We had just left off with religion in Golden Age Athens, and now we're on radical democracy. All right, so let's jump into this. Overview here. The radical democracy created in the 460s, 450s BCE by giving direct political power in the assembly and direct participation in the court system to all adult male citizens. And so that's what we mean by radical democracy. When you're talking about this, it means that participation by everybody who is eligible. So we have a radical democracy in the United States in the sense that you have to meet a certain age limit, and everybody can partake there. Here especially, they're going to have a lottery system for picking people for office and things like that, and positions, often seen as the most democratic because, again, as we talked about, this allows everybody an equal shot at this. But the thing with Athenian radical democracy, it's trying to balance these two really important competing goals. They want as much participation by, the regular folks, regular citizens. However, they also want selective leadership by the elite, the generals. Again, remember in Athens, the generals are their top citizens, top government officials. They're generals of the military. They're also leaders of the government here. And so they want participation, but they also want the elite having final say here, the sort of nobility of that. So it's tough to have both, right? Participation by everybody, but also selective leadership up at the top. So how'd they do this? Again, random selection for by lottery for most public offices. Again, that's good because, it's not just about who has the most money in the campaign. The other problem with this, though, the flip side of this is maybe the person selected for it is not the best choice. Term limits for everything except generals. Again, term limits, you can only serve in a position for so long. A goal here is to stop people from becoming entrenched in their positions, right? If you run one branch of government, one office, you have a lot of power. You become entrenched, you can use that power, misuse, abuse power, those sorts of things. So keep people moving, bring in new ideas, that sort of thing. Really major change here. A reform of the general Pericles was to offer salaries for most officials in the government. This is a really important change. To pay government officials. Otherwise, only the rich could participate because they have enough money that they could live on. They could go away from their jobs. Very difficult to do. You can't just give up a year of your life to work for free all the time. And so this ensures that there is participation. Open investigations and punishments of corruption. What do we mean by that? Public hearings, right? And we still do the same thing today. Equal protection of the law. Again, everybody equal in the eyes of the law, not benefiting the wealthiest. Payment and random selection for juries, again, so that do your civic duty, that you get paid for it. You're compensated for your time if you got to take time off work, that sort of thing. And random selection, again. So that's sort of the way we have it today, a lottery system for this. Another procedure here in radical democracy of Athens was ostracism. And you see here, it's called ostracism because it's parts of broken clay. And these clay pots here, these are actual pieces that were written in ancient Athens there. So this is an annual procedure by which a man could be voted out of the city-state for 10 years, essentially exiled. So this was a check on people getting too much power. Let's people say, we want to get rid of this person totally. So all male citizens could cast a ballot. As long as there were a total of 6,000 ballots cast, the man with the most, the top vote getter, was expelled from Athens. They are expelled from the city. Family is not punished, nor do they lose their property or wealth. The goal here is to prevent tyranny. To prevent anyone from gaining too much power at any time. The problem, this allows for majority rule. So, and usually the man ostracized becomes so popular or powerful that a majority of citizens fear that they become a tyrant or a dictator. And so this lets everybody vote on someone. It can also be getting rid of political rivals. One case this is the great general Themistocles, who had saved Athens, right? He's the one that decided to use their wealth to build that fleet, which comes back to save them. He is viewed as the best general in the Persian Wars by everybody. What happens is his political rivals realize they'll never be more popular than Themistocles. So what do they do? They get their followers to vote him out. Again, he had done nothing wrong. This was a way to remove a political opponent. Interesting story about him. He is kicked out of the city. He goes and lives with the Persian emperors. And he is treated greatly. He becomes an advisor and a friend to them. Why? They had such respect for this man that they allowed him in there, even though he had, defeated them. But there's also the absurdism of this. And this example is in the book from Aristides. You can actually see here one of the clay pots with his name scratched on it. So the story goes, Aristides is walking to the council. It's ostracism day, and he's talking to a guy. Who are you going to vote for? The guy says, I'm going to vote for Aristides. Obviously, he doesn't realize who he's talking to. He goes, oh, really? How come? Why? He goes, I don't know. I know nothing about the man. I don't know him, but I hear his name a lot, and I don't like that, right? So it could be just people going out and going after people for their names. But this is supposed to be a check, again, on tyranny, but again, it could also be misused and abused. We've talked about these people before, the medics, very important class in Athens. Essentially, these are what we would call in our system today permanent residence status, green card holders. Foreigners who are permanent residents in Athens in return for paying taxes and serving in the military. This is important because it allows, even though they can't participate in the government, they do bring in money, wealth, intelligence, all that skills. And so this makes Athens a place people want to go because that's where the money is. Women, we kind of talked about them a bit, but women, this is something you always see. The more money you have, the more freedom that the women will have there. So Athenian wives are expected to be partners in owning and managing the household, even though men held all the actual power. Women could acquire property, but there needed to be that male guardian or heir there. So it's not always the easiest. So an heiress is a woman in Athens whose father had died but left no male heirs. Technically, the closest male relative of the heiress's father is required to marry her, even if it's a family member. And he is considered their father's dad, the guardian. So you see that women are not always given the fair shake here. Another class were the hetaria, the heteraria. These are the Greek for companions. Again, they're not necessarily prostitutes in the common usage today. They're more of companions or escorts. Again, it's weird. They could sell their bodies for sex, but that's not always what it was. They were entertainment. They're the only women allowed at the symposiums. They were, educated. They were great conversationalists. They were artists, musicians, things like that. They lived, but it's like, there's the high class ones. There's the streetwalker sort of thing. Obviously the lower you are on the chain there, you have less power, and you're more open to threats of violence. But nonetheless, these women had, and especially in Athens and most Greek city-states, had more freedom in the sense and participation than other women. They could go to the symposia. They could participate. And these were usually not Greek women or not local women either. They might be Greeks, but from different city-states. But this was a way for women to have some sort of freedom. But women were, always had chaperones. The idea was to protect them from danger, especially what men usually says, protect them from rapists and things like that. In reality, and you see this in a lot of societies, why they have to have a male chaperone everywhere, there's no paternity test back then. So they got to make sure that's the only way, that the women can't be free on their own to go out and do as they please. So women were heavily restricted, especially in ancient Athens. It's a very patriarchal society. Here's an image of a woman at a symposia, a hetaria. As you can see here, they're depicted nude, but you see she's playing music, that sort of thing. There is a dude grabbing at her. But nonetheless, this is one of the images of it. Here are, women fetching water, just showing some of the day-to-day things. You would have these fountains in the city where women would gather water. Other things, let's talk about the education there. So the rich always had private tutors, often a slave in that, for their children, especially their male sons. There's always a aspect of physical education. Why? Mostly because they're going to be expected to fight in the military. The hoplites there. But it was also, you need to be strong, keep up your health, that sort of thing. They had gymnasia, which they all had. These were communal training. It's similar to the way people go to a gym today. One thing about the gymnasium, we'll see these later, about the Roman baths, they're also like spas. They're also social meeting places, things like that. However, most ways education went was a sort of a mentor-mentee, older, younger, favorite relationship. It often began as sons shadowing their fathers or uncles to just follow them, see how a man, see how they went about their day, their business, that sort of thing. This is different than the Spartan system, which was in the agoge, which was more sexual. This did not have to be at all. It could, but it wasn't. But yeah, this was again a mentor-mentee. Often you learn by watching and participating that way, and people showing you the ropes. What changes at this time is the sophists, these new traveling competitive intellectuals and teachers who offered expensive courses in rhetoric, again, public persuasive speaking, and new philosophic and religious thinking. They're a challenge to the system. Why do you have all these sophists, especially in Athens? Lots of money around, and people need their kids educated here. So they became common in around Greece, but again, most flocked to Athens because that's where the money is. Why is this a challenge? Well, again, they upend the traditions, right? It was usually fathers and sons and teaching in the family. Now you have someone as an outsider. As a parent, you're going to lose the ability to control what your kid is being taught and all that. Sometimes that's a good thing because you can't know everything, but people see it as a challenge to authority. They also feared demagogues. A demagogue is someone like a populist that can whip people up into a frenzy or get them to believe something that may not be true, right? Demagogues often mislead people and things like that. So the other thing here, this also creates more of a division within the classes. You have only the richest could pay for these high cost of sophists, and that only the wealthy can afford them. So you have yet more and more dividing of the social and economic classes here. These are very, very important change here, these for the sophists. One of these was Protagoras. This was one of the most notorious, they said. Why? Because he changed the idea. He challenged most traditions and views. He was a subjectivism. He said there is no absolute truth, right? There is, everything is subjective. Reality and perspectives matter. So he says here that especially two major points of subjectivism, human institution and values, are matters of convention and custom. Or matters of convention, custom, or nomos, the laws. They're not creations by nature, right? So there are, the laws are created by men, by human beings. So this means they can change, and they're arbitrary. They're often made from a certain person's perspective. And he also argues that since truth is subjective, speakers should be able to argue either side of a question with equal persuasiveness and rationality. Now, this is important. One, this is just a good thing to do. You should be able to argue both sides. One is, take from law school example, this is what they teach you in law school. Why? It helps you anticipate what the other side is going to do. If I can anticipate your arguments, I can react to them. The problem, people say, is that this is a bit, slimy, right? Because you can argue either side of something. It seems like you're not, you're not sticking to one principle or that. And that's what people are afraid of. And that's what sophistry becomes known as. This idea that they can manipulate people, and that they're creating moral relativism. Again, moral relativism is that our morals are relative, so none are better than the others. They change based on where people are. And this is threatening to the society here because you're supposed to have a collective view of things. But yeah, he's one of the most famous Protagoras. But again, subjectivism is still around today. And so We'll pick up here in video 4, which will be the last one of this here, and we'll get through this. All right. See you in the next bit.